Ladies and gentlemen, America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
All of us agree that the gravest domestic threat facing our nation today is drugs.
We know that drugs and crime go hand in hand. They just do. The facts prove that's so.
Strong law enforcement is absolutely vital to having a drug-free society.
War on drugs. Our first thoughts when hearing these words might be Mexico, Colombia, Afghanistan, the opiate crisis, mass incarceration, El Chapo, legal marijuana. Not a day goes by without drug war media coverage. But if we want to understand what's behind it all, we need to break it down. War on drugs. War, noun, armed conflict, hostility, a sustained campaign against an undesirable situation or activity. Drug, noun, medicine, substance taken for its narcotic or stimulant effects, often illegally. As author and cultural historian Mike J. writes in High Society, every society is a high society. Every day, people drink coffee on European terraces, sniff cocaine in American suburbs, chew coca leaf on Indian mountainsides, swallow ecstasy tablets in the clubs of Amsterdam, smoke hashish in Himalayan temples, and tobacco in every nation on earth.
So the word drug often carries a negative connotation. There isn't a good or bad drug or a dangerous drug. Every drug has benefits and risks.
Definitions, legalities, and our relationships to drugs have continuously been shaped throughout history by culture, politics, markets, and power. In the United States, what is illegal today might have been commonplace before, and vice versa. In the late 19th century, for example, marijuana was used medicinally, and cocaine was an actual ingredient in Coca-Cola, while alcohol was fully banned in the 1920s.
You know, we've seen throughout history that whenever a substance, a commodity that has an established demand is prohibited, it inevitably leads to violence because there's no legal way to resolve disputes. You can't go to the police or to the courts, and so people end up relying on violence. You know, people think of prohibition as sort of like the ultimate form of control, but actually it's kind of the opposite. It's like the abdication of control.
So what does prohibition imply? Official discourse over 40 years of US administrations has vouched for this system as an efficient strategy to rid our society of criminals and drugs. But in reality, drug laws have been shaped by racism. The first anti-opium laws targeted Chinese immigrants. The first anti-cocaine laws targeted Black communities in the South. The first anti-marijuana laws targeted Mexican migrants and Mexican Americans in the Midwest and Southwest. And today, Latino and Black communities are still disproportionately targeted by drug enforcement and sentencing practices, accounting for 57% of inmates in federal prison. The other ingredient has been political repression, as Nixon's domestic policy advisor later confessed, regarding who the administration's real enemies were: the anti-war movement and Black communities. Not only was prohibition implemented domestically, but also internationally through highly interventionist policies such as eradication and interdiction efforts in Latin America, where billions in US funding have led to further militarization, forced migration and displacement, resource exploitation, mass incarceration, and widespread human rights violations.
Pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into the military to fight drugs is just an inherently losing battle as well. So they're funding both sides of this war where neither side can win.
So instead of spending $50 billion annually on prohibition in the US and fueling violence and organized crime around the world, what is the alternative? First, we need to deconstruct our current understanding of drugs by asking ourselves,
What are the benefits? What are the risks? What are the types of relationships that people have with drugs? How do we reduce the harms and also enhance the benefits?
Answering these questions within a human rights, environmental, and scientific framework sets the stage to start thinking about regulation. Secondly,
creating a legal market for drugs, which is a difficult thing to do, and there's definitely pitfalls in that process. You don't want to end up with sort of the extreme of sort of free market capitalism, but it's hard to see how that could cause more damage than the current system.
assuming currently illicit drugs were taxed at a rate similar to those of alcohol and tobacco, tax revenue from drug legalization is estimated to yield $46.7 billion annually. So instead of spending all this money on criminalizing for drug offenses, this revenue could fund much needed harm reduction programs and public health services for addiction and problematic drug use, community-based public safety, and public education. So what can we do? Get informed and act locally.
The federal government gets the most attention, and we definitely need to have our eyes on that. We're playing defense a lot at the federal level, but it's always been and will continue to be at the local level and the state level where all the most cutting-edge reforms happen, because the vast majority of drug policy gets carried out at the local and state level. Whether it's harm reduction, criminal justice, marijuana legalization, or even things that aren't as much on people's radar, like psychedelics. I think where people can have the most impact is at the local level, and you can really see the effect of your work a lot more quickly.